So in the previous video, we created a simple Hello World application using a text editor. If you're using Windows, you probably used a notepad. I'm on a Mac, so I use TextEdit. And we use that to save our application as an HTML file. And then we open it up using our default web browser, Hello Web Browser. Now, before we proceed any further, we need to, what I call, tool up. Meaning we need to equip ourselves with better tools to handle the level of text editing that's going to be required to really make a full-fledged website. I'm here on Chrome, one of the tools that you'll need. Chrome is the recommended web browser for debugging. If you're feeling really advanced and really up to it, I would recommend downloading Firefox Developer Edition and download that as a second web browser. Again, we're not going to be using Firefox Developers Edition for this course, but it is a great web browser for debugging. And what I mean by debugging is really just checking your code to make sure it works properly and going through it step by step and figuring out what's wrong with it. The second really important tool that we're going to need is a more powerful text editor. Unlike most courses, I'm not going to tell you to use a particular text editor over another. What I do want you to realize is that picking a text editor is a very personal choice for a web designer or web developer. And that's why I don't really want to tell you to use a particular text editor, because it really does come down to personal preference. One of the most popular text editors is Atom. It's also cross-platform. You can install that on a Mac. You can install that on Windows. Another really popular text editor, especially for front-end web development, is Brackets. This is by Adobe. I'm actually going to be using this one largely because it's really great for educational purposes. It's really great for teaching front-end web development, and it's also a really great text editor specifically for front-end web development. If you want something more powerful, I would also recommend Visual Studio Code. This one is by Microsoft. It's also cross-platform, including being available for Linux. It really doesn't do much justice to call Visual Studio Code just a text editor because it has a lot of features built into it, including packages that you can download to customize the feel of it even further. For my personal professional development needs, I use a combination of Visual Studio Code and a fourth text editor that I don't actually recommend you download unless you really think that you're going to be getting into web development professionally. And that's Sublime Text. Sublime Text is a really lightweight, really fast text editor that's good for working with really large data sets. For my own professional development needs, I use a combination of Sublime Text 3 and Visual Studio Code. But again, you can download Atom. Atom is also cross-platform. You can download Brackets, which is specifically for front-end web development, and is actually what I'm going to be using. I'm going to download it now because I don't normally use Brackets, but for front-end web development purposes, it's a really great text editor. Again, if you're feeling more adventurous and you want something really customizable, I would recommend Visual Studio Code. And you might also want other miscellaneous development tools to help you in your web development journey. And one that I would highly recommend you sign up for is Github. Github is a free website, and it's the largest open source repository of web and really just any type of programming projects. You can really search for hundreds of, if not thousands of different apps that other developers have built available for free, and you can view their source code, you can view all of the different tools that they use, you can learn about installation. Further down the class, we will actually be using GitHub for various projects that we'll be building. Again, I highly recommend you create an account. In order to download the projects, you won't need an account, but I highly recommend you create one for yourself just so that you can go further in your web development journey. So that's a pretty short overview of all of the tools that we're going to use. So it looks like Brackets is downloaded for me. And here I've opened up Brackets and it welcomes me with a welcome screen. Go figure, it's an HTML file where it says getting started with Brackets. And this is actually a great tutorial for HTML, the way Brackets welcomes us with this particular index.html file. And this also gives us a little bit of an idea of what the structure of a real HTML document is like. We can see the outermost tag is the HTML tag. And even before this HTML tag, there's a doc type HTML. In reality, the browser can render various different types of files, including XML, JSON, etc. This open brackets, exclamation point, doc type HTML, close brackets. That first line tells the browser to expect an HTML file. Then we look at this open tag, this open HTML tag. It has, again, an open brackets, that's what we call it, and that's probably where the word brackets comes from for the text editor. So again, we have this open bracket, then the HTML, and then a close bracket. This is what we call an opening tag. And we see various different opening tags in this document. The HTML tag is an open tag. The head tag is an open tag. So a good way to think about an HTML document is it has a head and a body. And this particular document has a really long body. And then at the very end, we have a closing body tag and a closing HTML tag. After the closing HTML tag, we see a comment here. It's really good practice to comment your code and write notes, especially as you watch videos. I highly recommend you comment your code very thoroughly and take notes into the code files that we're going to be working on. We're not going to dive too deep into the details just yet. I realize this giant HTML file can be overwhelming for your first try, but for starters, just know that the structure of an HTML document is made up of the first line, doc type HTML, then an HTML open tag, which is closed at the very end. Then inside the open HTML tag, we have an open head tag and a closing head tag, and then an open body tag, and then at the end, a closing body tag. Those elements are the essential building elements for any full-fledged, full-featured HTML file. And that's how we're going to create our own HTML file, using just those elements. HTML open tag and close tag, a head open tag and close tag, and a body open tag and close tag. So really, an HTML document is in some ways like a person. It's got a head, a body, and HTML5 even introduced a footer tag. So it's got a head, a body, and feet. And that's what makes an HTML document like a person. In the next video, we're going to start creating our own HTML file and really dive into what these different tags and text really means. So until then, feel free to play around with brackets, feel free to experiment with your own tags, and start writing HTML.